Okay, good evening, everybody. Hello, my name is Isaac Hans Forsyth, and we are trying to learn interesting topics together. And thanks again to Riv Myers and ELC for sponsoring delicious food tonight. Thanks also to Brian, who is my partner in crime, who is not able, he's unwell tonight, so wasn't able to come, but he came up with the idea of, he comes up with the menu ideas, basically. So thanks very much to Brian as well. Greetings to our abroad crowd on Zoom. And so we are dealing with a very, essentially a challenging topic today. Oftentimes when people are asking these questions about where do we go when we die, what's the afterlife like, sometimes it's from a place of curiosity, and sometimes it's from a place almost of necessity. I had some series of conversations not too long ago with a person whose mum had passed away, and this person didn't really know. She just about knew she was Jewish, but that was pretty much the extent of it in terms of her Jewish knowledge. And she was asking me all these questions. She wants to know what's happening to her mum. So these are questions which can come up in easy and difficult contexts. However, I think that we'll find hopefully something which can be interesting to us, maybe even meaningful to us today. So to just begin with a kind of interesting side point. So in my other job, I'm a sleep therapist, a sleep counselor. So it's interesting that they used to think that talking about, different views of things over time, maybe scientifically, maybe not so scientifically, that they used to think that sleep was basically a time when nothing was going on. Sleep was a time of rest, and there's nothing really happening whilst you are sleeping. It's kind of just like a recharge. You stop, and then once you've stopped for a long time, then you have more energy to go again. But over the years, they have found that that's not at all true, and there's tons of stuff going on in your brain and in your body while you're sleeping. Does anyone know of any things? I'll wait on the Zoom so far because we have a expert sleep consultant on the Zoom actually. But any things that you know of that go on in your sleep?
Rapid eye movement.
Yeah, so rapid eye movement is one of the stages of sleep, which is kind of self-explanatory in terms of the things which are going. Do you know what happens during rapid eye movement sleep, for example? So there's a few things.
That's where dreams happen, right?
So that's primarily where dreams occur. They do occur in other places, but most dreams are occurring during that stage of sleep. There's four main phases of sleep. Rapid eye movement is one of them, and dreams are primarily happening then. Any other things that are going on, let's say physically, neurologically when you sleep? Does anyone know?
Muscles regrow.
Muscles regrow, yeah. So there's a whole thing about muscle regrowth and also even just growth in general. I think growth hormone is only produced when you sleep, interestingly enough. So you should, by rights, if a person is, let's say, in their teenage years, is not getting so much sleep. Have you ever heard of a teenager who doesn't get enough sleep? So should be a little challenging for their actual even physical growth in addition to muscle stuff. Yeah. Any other?
I expect to be a little taller when I get up in the morning.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, I'm not joking. It actually is the case. You wake up taller than you go to sleep. I kid you not. It's an actual thing. You can look it up if you want. It's an actual thing. Not by much, but yeah, like basically people at a certain age, up until a certain age, you're growing. From that age, I hate to tell you, you're shrinking. Not like so markedly that it'd be completely obvious, but if you measure someone when they wake up versus when they go to sleep, there's a very slight difference between the two. It's amazing. It's actually true. Yeah. Any other things that you know going on? Okay, so we'll bring in anything that the Zoom would like to tell us about what goes on when you're sleeping.
Yes, I mean the whole body basically regenerates your skin, memory consolidation, um, your processing of what happened during the day. Um,
Right. And I think, yeah, I'm sure a lot more to say, but I think that also helps bring in another, which is like the neurological element, which is that, for example, memory consolidation is something which happens when you sleep. So if you think it's a good idea, to say, I want to learn as much as possible, so I'll just learn and minimize the amount I sleep, you may learn a lot of content, but you won't retain much of it because the consolidation of your memory actually happens when you sleep. So that's one thing which is going on. There's a bunch of neurological things which are going on when you sleep. So it turns out, even though that the appearances are that sleep is a very quiet time when there's not much going on, but actually when you learn a bit more, it turns out sleep is a very, very busy time indeed. It's a very productive time. We may even find that that is something which is paralleled in the discussion that we're about to have today in terms of death, that what at first sight may appear to be a very quiet time could actually be a very busy time indeed. So feel free to take and pass over here, and a very productive time for that matter. Feel free everyone to go and get seconds and thirds during the course of the shiur.
We're gonna talk about dreams within dreams.
Dreams within dreams. I wish
Inception.
we are not doing a shiur in this series on sleep, but we can.
Was Inception actually about dreams, or was it about taking a road trip?
That's the kind of question which I can't answer. That's a different set of expertise to me.
It wasn't about sleep, but it was sleep and something.
So I'm not sure, but everyone can. In the meantime, you can watch Inception, and then we can maybe try and make a shiur on it at some point. But okay, so first we need to get the bigger picture. So as you know, these topics are massive topics, and interesting enough, there's not 100% consensus, on the answers to these questions. You may think they're the most fundamental questions. For sure, we should all agree. Not necessarily true. So on the other hand, the opinions which differ with one another don't necessarily differ about absolutely everything. So we're primarily following the approach of the Ramchal, and which ends up being actually, even though it's a lesser known approach, is actually the majority approach among the different writers and scholars over the years. And we're primarily focusing on that approach. So it doesn't mean that there aren't other things out there to say, but this is something we want to try and get our teeth into today. So first source on the sheet over here is from Da'at Vunat, which is one of the books of the Ramchal. And he says as follows. He's paraphrasing a quote from the Gemara, but he says it in a very helpful way. So we thought we'd quote it from him. So this is as follows. So, Chachamenu Zal, Horenu, She'olam Mitkayim, Shita Alfei Shanim. That the world, as we know it, i.e. what Olam Hazeh, the world as we know it, exists for 6,000 years. So it's actually a timeline on world history. So it exists for 6,000 years. And we're, of course, I do this every, right? 5, 7, 8, 6, right? We're not about to change the year. I mean, we're about to change a different year.
No, but I still want to check.
We're in a very
Was that?
I still want to check. That's what David Letterman joke. So much.
after Planet 10 before Purim. It's not much happening.
Yeah. So, right. So anyway, so we're kind of nearing some kind of climactic time over here. Anyway, so world Olam Hazeh is going to exist for 6,000 years. V'achar kach elef ashvi'i hu charuf. The seventh millennium, right? Or is it because you want to say it sounds like the 7,000th year, but it's not a year, it's 1,000 years. The seventh millennium. So that is called Charuf, which is like a destruction or desolate, but basically it's a time of transition for the world. And then V'achar kach HaKadosh Baruch Hu mechadesh olamo. And then God is going to renew his world, which is what the Ramchal will call Olam Haba. So here's what this quite funny. Here's what I made earlier. I don't know if anyone used to watch those art shows as a kid. They used to do something. Say, here's what I made earlier. Anyway, so here's what I made earlier. This is a timeline basically of what we've written. I need the visual stuff because I can't follow otherwise. So anyway, so this is going from right to left over here in the kind of Hebrew direction. This is basically what was just said. He just said Olam Hazeh is going to exist for 6,000 years. Then there's going to be a 1,000-year transition period. He called it Charuv, is also called Shabbos, Yom Shekulo Shabbos. It's actually that time of kind of rest transition. And then after that is going to be Olam Haba. There's a lot to say about that. We focused on that in other shiurim. We can speak more about that if you want, but this is really just the signpost. And also, by the way, as he said, the Yemot HaMashiach, the Messianic age, is actually at the end of the Olam Hazeh period. So it means it's really anytime now we should be expecting Yemot HaMashiach. So basically, what do we get from here? So we're in the imperfect world, and our job is to build it in to that actually perfected world. That Olam Haba is something which is not somewhere else, but it's actually here in a world which is more developed, partly by our actions, partly by Hashem's input. So that's basically an interesting thing. One thing which is noteworthy that we did not talk about here is the afterlife. No one ever said anything. We just talked about Olam Haba. We talked about Yom Shekulo Shabbat. No one has said anything yet about the afterlife, about where you're going when you die, because this is all basically life.
Growing up, some people say not Olam Haba, but Gan Eden, go to Gan.
So we're going to talk about that too. Yeah. So that's going to be relevant in two ways. we're going to talk about that in two ways, hopefully.
Is that the Ramchal? I remember we spoke this a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So does Ramchal say Gan Eden or does he say Olam Haba?
This is Olam Haba. This is Olam Haba. Gan Eden is going to play a little bit of a role over here, a little bit of a role over here, but it's not really the main. It's not really the main event. Interestingly enough, according to the Ramchal, it's there. It's important, but it's not. It's not the main thing. Yeah.
Temporary part.
What's that?
Temporary
Well,
part.
Yeah.
No, but that's the Olam Neshama, I thought.
Yeah. So it's
But the ending would be
That's the feed, the Rambam or something.
So I'll just to contrast this with you, basically, just for we're not trying to learn the Rambam's approach in this tonight, primarily because that would take its whole own shir or five shirim, which is just as by way of contrast, the Rambam Maimonides will primarily he will associate Olam Haba with the afterlife, meaning the place where you go when you die is called Olam Haba, and it's a purely spiritual realm. That's the oversimplification of the Rambam's approach. For the Ramchal, it's two completely different things. Olam Haba is where you live forever, meaning you develop yourself and the world into a more perfected state, and then you're actually going to live in an eternal way, body and soul together in Olam Haba. The Olam Haba we'll talk about more next week, but Hashem, that's the shir next week. But the place where you go when you die is what we're going to talk about today, which is an intermediate time. Let me just say, so for example, let's say someone dies over here, they die in the year 5000 or something like that. So what's going to happen is they're going to go to, we'll discuss, but they're going to go to some place or places, as it were, by the time that they die. And there's going to be more details, but primarily they're going to come back in with Tchiyat HaMeitim, and body and soul are going to come back together and live forever in Olam Haba. So it's a big topic. We did spend about 2 or maybe 3 shiurim talking about this topic. It's a big one. And there'll be more on Olam Haba stage later. But basically, it's this in-between time that we want to talk about now, is when the body and soul are not together. That's what we want to talk about, which is going to be interesting. So it's a vague, not vague, but a general overview of our discussion over here. Okay, so let's have a little look at this first source. So this first source is really giving us the second source on the sheet, the first about this topic of where we go when we die. So this is really giving us the broad overview of this. What's the history, as it were, of death? Death wasn't something which always was going to exist. How did that come about? What's its purpose? Where does the body go during that time? Where does the soul go during that time? So this is really going to be the kind of biggest, chunkiest source of the shir. So let's get into it. So this is as follows. This is Derech Hashem. So it's another work of the Ramchal, but a different book. This is as follows. Kevan shechata Adam Harishon. Once Adam Harishon, the first human being, sinned, nishtanu hadvarim shinui gadol. Things changed completely. As we discussed, that there was a much more perfect, not 100% perfect, because that would be Olam Haba, but there was a Olam Haba for the coming world. We'll translate it for now as the coming world. It's not, you probably oughtn't to translate it as the world to come, by the way, which is Olam, that would be Olam Lavo, Olam, the world to come. But it's Olam Haba, the world which comes. So something to think about. So anyway, but so it was in this near perfect existence when in his creation. But once he sinned, things changed very much. So what changed? So al yedei chato nosfu v'nitrabu chetzronot ba'atzmo shel adam shel ha'adam u'b'bria kula. Once he sinned, the lackings and the basically the things which lacked, so things were broken and imperfect. So those things very much increased both in the human being and in the world as a whole. So the idea of, this original sin stuff, the Adam Arishon, the first sin, eating from the tree, it wasn't just a simple moral and ethical issue. It wasn't, he was told a rule to not do something and then he did that thing and it was a bad thing for him to do. It actually had an impact. Is that there was something there was evil in the world, but there was something which was outside of him. It was isolated. What happened when he consumes the fruit is that he brought it inside himself. And so now this is the existence which we have, which is this complicated life where we have good and bad inside of us. And we're trying to work with that. So that's something which is post-sin Adam Arishon.
That just Adam Harishon, that happened within all of us when we sin.
Amazing, very helpful point. A bit of both, meaning there was a major change which happened at the time of Adam Rishon, but So, from like pure to not 100% pure. But every time that we sin, we do impact ourselves. So again, our sins are not just an issue of the do's and the don'ts, but it's actually something of, are we taking care of our own self or not? And when we do these negative things, they do have an impact on ourselves. Yeah, I think you were going to mention
Yeah,
something.
I think that the main problem with the sin of Adam and Rishon was
Yeah.
that he disobeyed Hashem, not so much as that the fruit was him.
So that, yeah, I think it's going to be a bit of both. So the point here is that maybe the main sin, maybe the main problem of Adam Arishon was the disobeying God versus the actual act of eating the fruit itself. But the truth is both are significant. It's true that the act of disobeying was a problem because, I mean, there's a lot you can say about that. But one thing that you can say about that is that God wants a relationship. So if you think, if someone you're trying to have a relationship with a person and you ask them to do something for you and you go and do the opposite of that, it's obviously not very good for the relationship. So that was certainly impactful, just the fact that it was disobeying. But on the other hand, the truth is it did actually, the actual eating of the fruit itself was significant. Just again, it's a massive topic, but just as one idea on this topic, the tree was called the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, right? The tree of knowledge of good and evil. But of course, the word da'at in the Torah doesn't only mean knowledge, right? So where do you know that the word da'at means something else as well? Also in Bereshit. The word,
Adam Yada et Chava.
yeah, Adam Yada Chavishto. So that Adam knew his wife. So it
Right.
doesn't mean he knew his wife, it means he connected to his wife. And so that also means connection. So what was happening in the sin of Adam Arishon was there was as we mentioned before, the world, it did have evil in it, but good was over here, evil was over here, and it was clearly identifiable. What happened is Da'at Tovara. When he consumed from the tree, there was now a connection between good and evil. And that's why life is so hard today, because it's like you can't tell what's what. So the truth is it was a bit of both. It was a bit of both, yeah. You wanted to mention a point.
Basically, was there back like in the beginning was when people after other religion,
Yeah.
when people sin, it also affected the actual world itself.
Yeah.
Whereas to now, it only affects like our inner self.
So that's what you think, but actually the truth is it's still even though okay, Adam Arishon, when he did what he did, it had a massive effect on himself and a massive effect on the world. It says Bria Kula. The honest truth is even that continues today to a lesser extent because it was from like almost perfect to very much not. But in a sort of relative way, we not only impact ourselves, we're focusing on the negatives over here, also positively by the good things that we do, and negatively by the bad things that we do, but we also impact the world. This is really the Nefesh Chaim's big idea that every single thing that we do and say and think has a massive impact on the whole world, even beyond that which you can see. So if I say a nice word to someone, so I can see that effect. Not always, but even beyond that, there's all kinds of stuff happening in the spiritual realms that you're affecting with your words and your actions.
So we just see it in a lesser degree, like after like not like a Mamu and also like the effect that they had on the world was greater than people sinning today.
Yeah, that's correct. Meaning, with great power comes great response. No, it's true. With great power comes great responsibility, but it's also I don't think that's really what I meant to say. Although I think that's also true. I wasn't the first one to say it. But it's basically like great power can go either way, and basically these were very very powerful people. So the good that they could do. Adam Arishon, he could have brought Olam Haba in a few hours. For us, it's going to take 6,000 years. But so his negative actions were also very impactful. For us, on the one hand, we don't quite have the standing of him, so the good that we do won't be as effective, and the bad that we do won't be as effective, but it's still effective. So it's not necessarily so visible to us, partly because the degree is smaller, and also partly because we're a little bit less in tune spiritually. So if we were more in tune with the spirituality, we would maybe be able to feel this stuff a little bit more. It's I don't know how many people there are nowadays who are on that level, but in the days gone by, Nefesh Chaim talks about the Avot, for example. They could feel spirituality, they could kind of sense it a bit more. So yeah, so that's basically the case. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, just real quick, okay, two things actually regarding the Avot sensing spirituality, because there's a concept that kept the Torah before it was given in the land of Israel.
Yeah.
So that would include keeping Chagim.
Yeah.
How could they keep Chagim without the Beit Din? Because they sensed it. It sensed a certain energy, right?
That's exactly what Nefesh Chaim says. What you just said is that's what Nefesh Chaim's way that he explains this weird idea that the Avot kept the mitzvahs before the Torah was given. How do you know how to keep mitzvahs before the Torah was given? So this is his approach, is that, for us, I need to be told the things to do in order to know what to do. But for them, they were able to sense what was spiritually the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do in a moment. And yeah, that's exactly what he says. Yeah.
And then regarding death, I mean, it's interesting because we have a tradition that Hashem looked into the Torah to create the world.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if he's looking into Vayikra, there's death penalty sins. So doesn't that mean that Adam was going to sin to bring death to the world is a question that's brought up, right?
Yeah, it's a very complicated issue in terms of what about we know what did happen in history, right? So we know the way that history did progress. But what if history had progressed in a different way? We say the idea of Torah is something which comes before, it was created before the world. Chazal even certainly says it was kind of the blueprint of the creation of the world. And yet, in the Torah, it's all kinds of things which relate to things which happened after Adam Rishon. Death is relevant over there. So it's really a big topic, how it is that we can have this idea that the Torah is something which is kind of primordial on the one hand, and yet relates to things which apparently were not in plan A. So I'm not really gonna, I don't think I'm
One
gonna answer
explanation.
Yeah.
If it was because the words, we don't know how the words would have been separated.
Yeah.
So it could have been the words were made in a certain way, and when Adam sins and the words then spread out and they create
Yeah.
ways where now it says death.
Yeah, that's also there is a thing. So like the main idea is that the spiritual essence of the Torah, which is in the letters of the Torah, was indeed something which was created before the world and is kind of the blueprint of creation. However, the way that came about, the way that sort of came into solidification depended on how history played out. I think, if I'm not correct, I don't know these things. I don't learn these things for example. I think it's Tikkunei Zohar. I think it's one of the Zohar works. I think it's Tikkunei Zohar, which goes through like tons of different ways that even just the word like Bereshit could be broken up, and that would have had many different implications. So, for example, one of them is like relating to Aramaic. So we know Bereshit, which means in the beginning, but it could also be Bara Shit, which means created 6, and the 6 days of creation. So there's also relates, yeah. Jay, what were you thinking?
Yeah, we mentioned that, I mean, that Olam Haba is forever, and didn't we already establish in Garden that Hashem puts up a malachim to prevent people from eating from the Eitz Achai, because human beings can't live forever. It's not good for their
Only post-sin Adam Rishon, only post-sin. That's correct. What you said is after Adam Rishon sinned and he became in a very imperfect state. So this is going to relate very much to the topic. It's actually good you brought it up. So it'll kind of lead us in. So after Adam ate from the tree and he had gained all this kind of internal spiritual negativity, he'd internalized that. So he better not now eat from the Eitz Chaim, which is going to make him live forever, because then he's going to live forever imperfect. That's not the dream. The dream is to be in the perfect state forever. So basically, that's going to be the work of history to some extent, but also the process of death is going to be exactly that thing that we need in order to get all those impurities out of us. And then once Tchiyat HaMetim comes along and there'll be the revival of the dead, so then we'll be ready, we will be in that refined state, ready to live forever. So let's get into some of the sources which talk about that. So he says, okay, so then, Adam, so we're in this source over here. So Adam, the first person, things changed a lot when he sinned. There was a lot of spiritual negativity which was introduced into him, into the world. And then Al-Kain Nigzar Al-Ha'adam Shiyamut. And therefore, there was this decree that Adam would die, because as we're about to see, death is a very, very productive process of getting out all the things that you need to get out. So let's talk about the body. So Bisman HaPerut Hazeh. In the time of this separation, this is a time where we said body and soul are going to separate. That's the main real definition of life and death. Life is when the body and soul are together. Death is when the body and soul are separate. It's not that things stop existing. It's just a question of connection or separation.
So that's why I say that sleep is the 60th of death, because like we say that God is going to take care of our our soul.
Exactly. So listen to this. You know the idea that when you sleep, your soul kind of goes up. So you're going to see it's going to be really simple. The idea of death is going to be a big parallel to that. And the quote which you just brought up from Chazal, sleep is the sixth of death, is going to help us with that. So he says, so בזמן הפרק הזה ראוי שיהיה מקום לשני החלקים המתפרדים. What in this time of separation between body and soul, so it's going to make sense that these two parts should have their own places that they're going to go to. Naot lama shenirtze leperiod hazeh, fitting for exactly what's required of this time of separation. V'hine haguf. So where's the body going to go? Tzarich sheyachzor liyisodo v'tipared harkavato v'tifsad tzurato. What is going to happen is that the body needs to go into the ground. When it's going to go to the ground, it's going to, as it says, like its component parts are going to separate up, its form is going to be lost. In other words, so the process that we know of, like the decay and all that stuff which is going on in the grave, so that is a really important process, because through that process, that's the thing which is going to extract all of the impurities. Number one, from Adam Arishon, from the thing which was initially integrated into the human being with that and passed on to everyone else, but also, things that we do in our life, are going to affect us, and those are going to be kind of taken out at that time. So it's actually the idea of the body going into the grave and going through that whole process is actually a really important, it may not be a happy clappy process, but it's actually a really important and productive process. So that's where the body's going to go. It's going to go into the ground. That's kind of what's going to happen. What about the soul? So God also created Olam HaNeshamot, the world of souls. And this is primarily, it's Shebo, Tich Nasena, HaNeshamot, Hazachot Acharei Satan Minaguf. That this is the place that the souls are going to go, a place called the soul world, Olam HaNeshamot, or the world of souls. This is where the souls are going to go once they separate from the body. V'teshochna sham b'makom menucha. They're going to stay there in a place of rest. As we're going to see, they don't really have any the impurities and all that stuff didn't really affect the soul in the same way. So it may have affected the body and things like that, but it didn't really affect the soul in the same way. So the soul isn't really going to have that kind of work to do as such. So what is going on in this place of menucha, this place of rest for the soul? So it's kol hazmanahu teshuchna haneshamot ahen b'ma'ala u'b'ta'anug. That at this time they're going to be on a high level in the spiritual zone. They're going to be on a high level, and they're going to be ta'anug. They're going to have enjoyment. They're going to have pleasure at this time. Me'ein ma shinaten lahen achar kach bizman hagmul ha'amiti. It's going to be a taste of that which is going to come in what he calls the time of the true rewards. So, because the Ramchal, the time of the true reward is actually going to be when the body and soul come back together again. The body is going to be in its refined state. It's going to be able to express the soul in a much better way. Like at the moment, we have a body and a soul. We're made up of these things, but we find it hard to express our soul. Our bodies are kind of holding us back to some extent. They're also helping us, of course, because without the bodies, you couldn't really do anything in the world. You couldn't really do anything productive. But what was I going to say? The body is ultimately, your soul isn't shining through necessarily. But what's going to happen is in the grave, your body is going to be refined to an extent where it can be rebuilt into a kind of physicality which is able to work together with spirituality as opposed to working against it. And so that's basically the work which is going on there. And the soul is basically having like a pretty good time at this stage. The soul is only really enjoying, and it's in its realm of spirituality, which is so to speak. Like obviously it's deeper than this, but it's quite nice for the soul because the soul has had quite a struggle in this lifetime where it's been living an existence where it can't fully express itself. So now it's going to be, it has a time where it's going to be able to express itself, and then eventually they're going to come back together again for what is called the Gemula Amiti. That's going to be the true reward, is body and soul together. So that's the overall picture. I'll just come to you in just a second. So this is where we go. So the what's happening when after 120, as we say. So what's happening then? So the body is going into the ground and it's going through a whole very productive refinement process in order to become ready to join together with the soul in a much purer way. The soul is actually mostly having kind of like a good time, so to speak, in the spiritual realm. But it's not going to be receiving its full rewards, its full spiritual enjoyment. That's going to be later, but it's getting a taste of that, which will be when it comes back together with the body again. So that's kind of this map. This is for my own visual. That's kind of what is going on here. So what's going on when a person passes away? So the soul is going up, the body is going down. They're both doing what they need to do to eventually come back together again. Yeah.
Where does Gehinom fit into that?
Where does that?
Gehinom.
Gan Eden. So the
Gehinom.
sorry,
Gehinom.
Gehinom. Yeah, we're going to get to that. So that's there's two caveats we need to bring to this. One is and one of them is Gehinom. So Bezrat Hashem, we're going to get to that. Yeah. So this is so this is quite a big thing. So I don't know for how many people this is something which is familiar or at least intuitive or unfamiliar and or unintuitive. I don't know what people's reactions to this are.
It's getting closer.
It's getting closer.
For
Yeah.
some of us, it's getting closer.
I heard the phrase about the earth being destroyed for being devastated for like 1,000 years, and I had no idea what it meant, and it sounded very weird to me.
So basically, yeah. So we can that we'll talk more about next week. So just add quick advert for next week. But basically, in many ways, it's actually a very parallel process to the body. So what we just described for the body has to come, go through a transition to get to a more refined state where it's able to work together with spirituality. So basically, the same thing is going to happen to the whole world. And what that means is that the world is going to need to go through a certain transition in order to be able to be Olam Haba, a place where God's light can shine, even in this world over here. So that is a true statement, and that's referring to that time over there, which is quite parallel to what we've just talked about.
There must be a separation between the body and the soul.
Yeah.
So if Mashiach comes now, so all those people are not going to go through that.
We'll again, quick advert for next week, but basically the thing is, so let's say if a person is alive at either way, there's actually we talked about it last week, I think, but whatever. There's actually two times of Tchiyat HaMetim, basically. So the time number one is in the Messianic times, where but if anyone isn't still alive at that time, so they're going to have a Tchiyat HaMetim, and there's going to be certain things. And then basically what's going to happen primarily is everyone is going to go back into the grounds again for this transition period in order for kind of the world and everyone to get ready for what's to come. So it will be something which will be relevant to everyone. They'll kind of like work out logistically the details of that, but it will be something which is relevant to everyone. Yeah. Yeah.
So the source for a lot of this is how would you know what comes after life? Presumably the people here are always living.
Correct. Yeah. So the main source of these things. So I think the Ramchal himself says this, that in Derech Hashem, I think, is that there's two ways that we can know these kinds of things. One of them is from logic, or at least kind of a reasonable philosophical mind to like work things out and see what makes sense, what doesn't make sense.
Logical?
No. So then no. So that's the first category. The second, it's not necessarily illogical, but meaning it's not. But that's the first category. So some things that we can know in that way. The other category is basically prophecy, meaning that it was the revelation, that it was told. It was told to us. So this is primarily going to be in that second category. This is not something you almost, as you're saying, almost by definition, it's not something you can really know.
Well, so typically there's things like energy is never destroyed.
So that's also an interesting point as well. They talk about that it kind of, there's things which fit with this idea. So I'm not saying, so as we say, it doesn't mean the idea is illogical. There's various things which will make this idea be very appealing or make a lot of sense, but it's not something that you could have come to, as far as I'm aware. It's not something you could have known by yourself without someone, be it a prophet or, in theory, a person who's gone there and come back. But that's less common. A series. If you look up as you see, I keep doing ... over here. Sorry, that's noise. I keep doing ... over here, but basically he quotes a bunch of sources in the middle over there. So if you look up that chapter of Derech Hashem over there, you'll see a bit more there. Yeah.
But the thing is, like, there's this quote that, like, I don't know if it was Rish Lakish who said that, like, all of the prophets only spoke about Yemot HaMashiach, and Tchiyat HaMetim and anything else, we don't know anything about them, or something like that. Only Hashem knows.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that for sure. There is less and less we know as we go down the chain.
Okay,
So we know quite a lot about Olam Hazeh. We know a bit less, not so much, but something about Yom Mashiach. And as things get further on,
Okay.
we know a little bit. We still know some stuff though. Once it gets to beyond, by the way, there's a whole thing, but once it gets to 10,000, I mean, there is time after this. It's quite interesting. Even after the, thing which is going to be forever, there is still some idea of time. Now it's going to work in the same way, but they talk about, the next millennium, what's that going to look like, and the next one, the next one. But when the Ramchal gets to the year 10,000, he says, and that it's just. We just don't know anything anymore. But he does, but until that, he actually says quite a lot of stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a truth to that point. Okay, so let's give the two important caveats. There's probably more, maybe even three, but let's just give two important caveats to what we've seen. So take a look at this third source about the grave. So what it sounds like so far is that soul goes up, body goes down, everything's going to go through its process, and that's it. In that sense, there wouldn't be really anything more going on sort of in the body. It's just kind of stuff happening to the body. However, look at this source over here. There are a few different sources which indicate this, but this is the most crazy one, so I just brought it for you. So it says Amar Rebbe, Bo urei heich mesaprim hametim bikvuratam ze im ze. Come and see how the deceased people in their graves speak to each other. So I'm sure someone is going to come on somewhere and give a metaphorical explanation of this, but there is actually a certain literal, albeit spiritual, explanation of this verse, that there is actually, in other words, basically, there is some level of consciousness which continues even in the grave. So it's not the same level of consciousness as being alive, obviously, but the consciousness is not completely gone. And part of why that is because we actually have different levels of our soul. We don't just have body and soul and that's it. Within the soul, we have different levels, nefesh, ruach, neshama, etc. And even within each one of those, there's 10 levels. And within those, there's levels. But the point is, our spirituality is not just kind of one amorphous blob. It's actually a very sophisticated system. So actually what happens is that there is an element of the soul, even though primarily what we've said is true, that primarily the soul goes to Olam HaNeshamot, the world of souls. There is an element of the soul which actually remains with the body in the kever, in the grave, which has all kinds of implications. One of them is this thing, that there's this idea of like speaking to each other. So it brings I'll just finish one, I'll come to you in a second.
There's actually halachic implications as well.
Yeah, go on.
You're not supposed to talk Torah in a
Right. So all these things. So all these
Yeah.
things you could have viewed as good manners. Do you know what I mean? Like you could have viewed as, oh, it's the right thing to do to not talk in this way or not talk in that way. But it's not just good manners. It's like an interaction. It's like interactions which can actually go on. Now, so it says that these people talk to each other. What it also means is that you can talk to them. It doesn't mean that you're going to receive a reply from them. Feel free to tell me if you manage that. What's that?
Is it allowed to do that?
Yeah, it happens in Tanakh, happens in Chazal all the time. Again, whether it's advisable is a different question. There are different opinions on this thing. Just the extreme opinions are the Vilna Gaon is totally against all of this stuff. In general, it should be said that he feels that graves of tzaddikim, of righteous people, are a bit of an exception to that rule. But in general, just going to graveyards for not an important enough reason, Vilna Gaon is not in favor of. But obviously, tons of people are in favor of it. Tons of people are doing this all the time. And obviously, in the more Hasidic world, that's much more a popular thing to do. So obviously, different opinions on how advisable it is. That's not for me to say that point. But does it work? The answer is it does work. So that's another thing. Yeah, we got a question from this.
In one of the morning psalms, I think it's the musician, something for the musician. Does it not say that that although the words being spoken, nobody, there's no sound, but it travels all over the world? And I wondered if that was related.
It could be. I don't know, but it's a good point. I think what I will say is that yeah, when I said don't expect to receive a reply, I probably didn't speak precisely. What I mean is don't expect to hear a reply.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that they're conversing with you. I'm not sure, but they're for sure hearing you. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So that's something pretty significant.
The story of this guy who went to a right in Masechet Brachot,
Yeah.
where like one of them was going around the world and one of them was confined,
Yeah.
and they were talking about how the harvest would be.
Yeah, so there are things like that. I was thinking of there were a couple of Gemara, even like in like Gemara itself quotes Yeah.
in Ruckus.
Yeah. Yeah. So there were some of those. This one was the most impactful, so I just brought this one. But there are a bunch of things which now start to make weird sources which start to make sense once you accept this idea. I just will. I meant to add this in before, but once we're talking about different parts of the soul going to different places, open parentheses. This is a bit where Gan Eden comes in, the Garden of Eden, because as we mentioned, there's Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. So whilst the neshama, which is the highest level of soul, does indeed go to Olam and Neshamot, the world of souls, which the Ramchal mentioned, he doesn't mention this, but the Ruach, the intermediate part of your soul, goes to Gan Eden. So close parentheses. It's a big topic, obviously, but just partly people were asking where Garden of Eden comes in. It is a place where part of the soul goes in this intermediate period. So this is one point: is that you think it's quiet in the grave, not necessarily so quiet in the grave. It's all kinds of things, and so it makes the idea of taking care of a person after they've passed away, takes on a whole new significance. It's not just respectful. It's not just like the right thing to do. It's actually kindness. It's actually just like you can do a chesed to another person who's sitting right across from you. You can also do a chesed, and that's something that this person is able to feel and is able to know at that time. Okay, the final thing, which is again is the least happy clappy, but actually it ends up being really interesting, is about Gehinom. So we do need to, of course, talk a little bit about this before we conclude. So back to Derech Hashem, and he says as follows. So Gazar od chasto yitbarach, that God in his kindness decreed this thing, which is again, it's not the way you expected to hear a paragraph about Gehinom, which I will loosely translate as hell or purgatory or whatever you want to translate it as. But the main thing is the explanation of what it is, such that we don't get incorrect ideas from other religions. So the kindness of God was as follows: Laharbot atzlacha livnei adam, to help us be more successful. Shematzei od means min siruf acher lemi sheitachin bo hatziruf, that there should be a further refinement process for anyone who needs. Who hadin begehen? Who hadin begehen? This is referring to the din, the judgment which goes on in Gehinom. So this is a place where the person goes for a period of time, a limited period of time, after passing away. Is this realm? So what's going on there? V'akavanabo hu lahanish achote kafi chatav, is to give some punishment for the sins that a person has done. Ba'ofen sha'acharei he'ansho lo yeh od chov alav, for the purpose that once that has been done, there is nothing left negative standing with their name. No more chov, no more negativity standing with. It's all gone. They took it all away. So it's obviously going to be a hard process because it's obviously something which is negative, but the outcome is extremely positive. It gets all that negativity away. Regarding that which they did. And then once you've done that, then you can receive the reward for all the good stuff that you've done. So basically, this is kind of like the timeline. There's like a new timeline, which maybe I won't draw now because it's a little bit small, but that's, as it were, the timeline of what's happening when someone passes away. So what you've got here is so when someone passes away, the first stage is this Gehinom stage for whom it's relevant. As we mentioned, it's limited time, so it's the maximum of 12 months. But it's likely to be far less for most people. But it's some actual limited period of time where a person is experiencing a very hard time. But it's all a refinement process. It's to get all that. It's like a purging, get that negativity away, and then once even whilst they are still in their what we call this mana period, the time of separation of body and soul. But then that part is all done with. So if someone passed away in the year 1000 or something like that. So then that was done with ages ago, and it's all the other stuff since then.
So my question was, what part of the goof and the neshama is involved in Gehenna?
Yeah. So I don't.
Is it
I asked this question. I asked this question to someone who knows a lot about it. He said that it was a bit of like a cryptic answer. He said that the person is there. So I don't know exactly what that means. So I have a thought of what that means, but I'll just tell you that's the words which we use. So it seems like a good amount of the soul is there or something like that, but I'm not 100% sure. But there is evidently like some presence that the person is having in that negative zone for a period of time. But then, basically after that, what's happening is that the soul is in its spiritual realms, experiencing, a spirituality and a taste of the good stuff to come. And the body is going through also in some ways a hard time, but it's a very productive time. And it's a process of cleansing and refinement. And even then, that the body is still maintaining as it were, the person in the grave is still maintaining some level of consciousness, which would have all kinds of implications. And with this, so this is kind of like our picture of a little bit about what's going on. Of course, there's endless depth to try and go through these topics even more, but these are kind of like the signposts of some of the main things that are going on. Obviously, give us some tools to think about that. Jay, do you want to?
So you're talking mainly about people buried, but there are people who get incinerated.
Correct. So this is one of the reasons why we don't like that. Meaning, we just talked about how constructive and important a period of time in the grave is, because it doesn't mean it's not happy clappy, but it's really helpful for the refining. So this is one of the reasons why we don't like a process we don't like a thing which doesn't enable that process, i.e., cremation.
But there are times it was against the person's will.
Right, and for the record, even then, it doesn't mean that the process can't happen. It's just it's a different book, basically. It doesn't come up in the process will happen, especially in those cases. But in general, there is still a process. There is still a way. But basically, it's more complicated than what we've said, which I'm sure everything that we said is very easy and not complicated at all. So,
One way, like with the Shoah, the 6 million, they reincarnate and get burial. That's one way.
So there's a few different options of what can happen there. I'll just kind of like leave on a little bit of a note here, and I'll still be around for questions. But I just want to give people the time to do whatever they need to do. But it's just interesting that after you go into this more and more, you think, when you think of death, you think it's like the opposite of life, right? You think it's like maybe nothing's going on, maybe it's all negative. Actually, it's quite similar to life when you think about it. Because I was thinking, there's three things, right? So one of the things is, what is life is a mixture of good and bad. So there's also going on there. So there's also a mixture of good and bad, which is going on. And in life,
The bad.
So the bad, or at least let's say it's difficult, let's say, meaning even basically it's a deeper idea that any idea of like punishment or whatever is always for a constructive purpose. So it's stuff which is like it's not going to be a happy time in Gehinom. It's not going to be there's not necessarily like the most happy things going on, but they are extremely helpful. Which brings me to the next point: is that the things which seem like the worst are actually often the best. And like just the whole idea of death at all, you think it's the worst thing, which Anna sins and God says now you're going to die. Actually, that was the most helpful thing that could have possibly happened to him, because he has all this negativity inside of him, and death is the way to get out all of that negativity. Some things which seem like the worst are actually the best, and maybe most of all, the things which are the hardest are really the most important. And that's kind of something which is true in life. The things which we work hardest for are often the most important, and these things which in death are there's going to be hard things, but it's really very important and very helpful and very productive. So that's some attempt at a tip of an iceberg of a big topic. Yeah. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Rabbi Noah Weinberg, right? He said death gets the body out of the